Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to 15-Minute Finance. Today we're going to be talking about the stock Rocket Lab. So Rocket Lab is actually in a pre-SPAC position right now. So they're trading under the ticker symbol VACQ for Vector Acquisitions, which is the company that's going to be taking them public sometime around probably the third or fourth quarter of this year. What they do is basically think of them as similar to SpaceX. So they want to kind of be the FedEx of small rockets and FedEx of space. So they have three vehicles which actually cover 98% of commercial satellites in the market. So they have the Electron rocket, which is their small rocket, and the Neutron rocket, which is their medium rocket. And with these two combined, they can take up 98% of satellites that need to go up into orbit. So they actually also just began building satellites in-house. So this will allow them to act as a one-stop shop for companies that want to put something into orbit for, either bettering technology or adding another business platform to, their current business or their current company. So this is kind of an interesting thing to watch, and we'll see in the future if they're actually able to pick up some steam and generate some revenue based on this satellite as a service. So this company is actually, despite being a SPAC, it's actually pretty well established. They have had 18 launches and deployed 97 satellites so far in the life of the company. They have 2 launch pads, one in Virginia and one in New Zealand, and they've actually launched the second most rockets by a US company, second only to SpaceX. So anytime you're second to SpaceX in any category, it's probably a good thing because SpaceX is just a world leader in rockets. So even if you're relatively close to SpaceX, and being second is pretty much as close as you can get, that's a good thing in my book. They also have contracts right now with NASA to the moon and Mars, and they have a ton of different missions with private industry to launch satellites. And they're also actually launching Australian government satellites. So in terms of this business, they're very well established. They have key business partners both in government and non-government positions. So they're pretty well on their way to becoming a primary provider of basically shipping to orbit. Looking at the numbers of this company, they have about $750 million in cash on the balance sheet once this merger goes through, which again, it should in the next 3 to 6 months here. 70 million in revenue is forecasted for 2021, which is a 95% year-over-year growth, which is absolutely phenomenal. And then they're expecting to be cash flow positive by 2024 and forecasting $1 billion in revenue by 2026. So in my opinion, these forecasts are basically worthless because trying to forecast cash flow and revenue that far out when there's going to be so much competition in this space is basically impossible to do. So I would basically just take those numbers with a grain of salt and really just focus on kind of the year-over-year growth and maybe 1 or 2 year projections for this company. The total addressable market for space and space shipping is expected to grow to $1 trillion in 2030. And that number might even be a little bit low, and it shouldn't really surprise anybody because where humans as a species are going is towards space, right? And the technology that we're developing, especially pioneered by SpaceX, is just pushing it further and further in that direction, even quicker than I think a lot of people might have thought. That means that Rocket Lab has a chance to just even grab a hold of 10% of a $1 trillion market is an incredible opportunity, especially getting in this early when after their merger, they're going to be valued at about $4 billion. Like I said, they're currently trading under the ticker symbol VACQ, which will move over to RKLB once the merger goes through. So the 52-week range for this stock is about $9.72 to $15.15. And that 15.15 was at the highs of basically all the space stocks. Whenever Cathie Wood came out and said, we're creating a space ETF. So basically all the space stocks got a boost. But since then, they've come down and they're hovering right between $10 and $11 at the moment, which again, I think currently is a very good buying opportunity. Some of the advantages that this company has is that they are a first mover in this space. So a lot of their competitors are still trying to build the rockets themselves, let alone actually sending up a satellite that a paying customer has, put out a contract for. And Rocket Lab has already done this, right? So they've proven that they can do it, whereas a lot of their competitors haven't even built a rocket yet or even proven that they can launch it and successfully get a payload into orbit. They're also the leader in small rocket launches by a mile. Like, it's not even close, and this is actually one category that they're beating SpaceX at. So like I said, it's good to come in second whenever you're compared to SpaceX, but beating SpaceX in a certain category is even better. And I know that there's a little caveat in that SpaceX does not focus on small rocket launches, but that just proves why this is potentially a very, very lucrative investment, because no one's really focusing on this small rocket launch space. But Rocket Lab actually has the advantage in it right now. And I think that they're only going to get stronger and stronger in their position as more and more people enter the market. They're going to be compared to Rocket Lab rather than competing with Rocket Lab. The satellite as a service business model that they're setting up is actually very intriguing because it allows companies to just come to Rocket Lab and say, I want to put up a satellite on X day and I want it to do this, right? So they can actually build that satellite for them and launch it and provide them with launch windows in which they can do it, instead of the company having to go to 3, 4, 5 different other providers and then trying to bring it all together. They just go to Rocket Lab, one place, and they'll do everything for them. So I think this is actually going to be a pretty big business segment and actually going to bring in a lot of revenue in the future, especially as the prices start coming down and space becomes more accessible to a lot more private companies. A few risks that you do have to consider when thinking about investing in Rocket Lab is that no matter how much of a head start a company has, especially in a technology space or an engineering space like space launches are, any company can come in with better technology and disrupt the space and become the new number one. I mean, look at what Tesla did in automobiles, right? They were this small company who really had no revenue, who didn't have a ton of backing, and they just totally disrupted a space, the automobile industry, that has been in place for over 100 years, where the biggest players were sitting pretty and thinking that, they have this place cornered. They have their market share, and that's not going to go away. But as we saw, disruptors in the technology space can come in and immediately become pretty much the biggest company in that market. So this is definitely no different than that. And the fact that this market also hasn't matured yet just shows that there's a ton of room for disruption. There's a ton of room for new companies to come in with better technology and either underbid or just beat out the technology of Rocket Lab. One thing that Rocket Lab does not have is full reusability. And what I mean by that is when you see companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX, their rockets actually bring back the rocket and they use propulsion to slow it down. Whereas right now, what Rocket Lab has to do is actually try and catch their rockets and their propulsion with nets, with helicopters, right? So it's very primitive, and right now they're just letting them splash down in the ocean and then they're going to get it, but they've actually stated that their goal is to use these helicopters and this net system in order to achieve reusability for their Electron rocket. So their Neutron rocket isn't developed yet, and they're actually building in that reusability similar to SpaceX and Blue Origin, which is absolutely necessary. But right now, that's definitely just a downside of Rocket Lab's smaller rockets, is that the reusability is extremely primitive, and the new entrants to that space, that small rocket space especially, are probably going to have much better reusability. The absolute biggest risk to this company is the Neutron rocket. So it's not fully developed yet. That's what they're spending the majority of their cash on, is going to be developing this Neutron rocket so that they can cover that 98% of commercial satellites that want to go up. So if Neutron rocket fails, which it very may well, then they're going to run through all of their cash in development, and then they're not going to have anything left over, and the company might go bankrupt. So that is a pretty big risk, and it has pretty big implications, but so far they were able to successfully develop the smaller rocket, and I think that they might be able to bring in experts, maybe be able to steal them away from larger companies like NASA, like Boeing, like SpaceX, who have more experience in the medium rocket space. But if they aren't able to master that medium-sized rocket, the Neutron, then it could easily bankrupt the company. So my thoughts, despite all of these risks, is that I would try and get in early with this stock. Right now it's trading at about $10, $11 a share, and it has a market cap of about $4 billion. So right now SpaceX is about a $70 billion market cap by a lot of estimates. They're a private company, so we don't have the full transparency into all of their financials and everything, but that's over 10 times, almost 20 times the market cap of what Rocket Lab is coming in at. So that potential for growth for Rocket Lab is huge. And the fact that you're not investing in a company that has no revenue or no product and they're untested, they haven't ever sent anything up to orbit, right? This company has proven that they can do it. They have government contracts, they have private contracts, they're actually growing their revenue. So it's a bet and a gamble in an untapped marketplace, but it's not really a bet or a gamble on if the company can actually execute, because they already have. And again, this is a highly speculative investment, so a lot can happen, and especially I would look at the competition that's upcoming in the future, particularly Astra. That's another company I might cover in a future video, but they have a lot of smart people developing rockets, and I think that they could be a major competitor for Rocket Lab and, potentially even overtake them. You never know what's going to happen in the future, but definitely keep an eye out on competition and kind of new technologies in the field if you are going to jump into space investing. So again, right now, this is a stock that I really like. I'm constantly buying into it on the dips, and I think that it's going to be a great long-term hold in the future. I'm looking for over 5 years until I actually start seeing some meaningful gains, but I think that the total addressable market is huge, and the potential for growth for this company, and honestly a lot of the early entrants, is just exponential. So I think this is a pretty good stock. It's definitely a speculation play, but I think it'll pay off in the future. So thank you for tuning into the video. If you enjoyed it, then like and subscribe. Let me know what you think in the comment section below, and keep an eye out for future videos.